Hi guys, it's Cornish kayak angler here from kayakfishing.blog. In today's video I'm going to be looking at the different fixtures and fittings you can use to attach accessories to your kayak. As kayak anglers we love to add accessories to our kayaks. So it might be extra fishing rod holders, it might be camera mounts, it might be an anchoring system, or it might be a fish finder mount on the deck. But there's loads of accessories out there, and often we want to put them on the kayak somewhere. It will mean drilling into your kayak, it will mean fitting that accessory to your kayak. Now a common question is, what do I need to fit the accessory to my kayak? What do I need to use? What's the best fixing? Well, in today's video I'm going to run through some of the popular fixings we would use to attach accessories to kayaks. And these are going to be self-tapping screws, we're going to be looking at a nut, washer and bolt combination, also trifold rivets, and rubber expansion nuts, also known as well nuts. So what I'm going to be doing is looking at each of those and using those to fit a small accessory to a piece of plastic as an example of fitting it to a kayak. So we'll look through each of those. Each have advantages and disadvantages, and some are better for some situations than others, but we're going to discuss that and look at each one. Okay, before we go on and look at how we can use different fixings and fixtures to attach accessories to the kayak, a little safety note. Now when drilling into a kayak, because it comes as no surprise, putting a hole in a kayak is going to compromise the integrity of the hull, potentially could cause a leak. Now don't worry too much, because as long as you're using some sealant when you're attaching your accessory with fixings, you can waterproof that fixture and you won't have any leaks. Now for this I use either just a standard clear silicone. Use a clear one because you don't want to go using white or blacks, it will make your hull quite messy. So choose a clear silicone, or if you can get hold of it, Sikaflex EBT Plus, again in clear. EBT Plus is slightly better than the silicone in that it's not just a sealant but it's also an adhesive. So it will make your fixing slightly stronger, as well as sealing it well so the water won't get in. Also, when we're drilling holes into kayaks, be sure to be working above the water line of the kayak. So the water line is where the water would sit along the side of the hull if you were sat on the kayak with all your gear. So it's usually around halfway along the hull or along the seam line of the kayak. But as long as we're working above that, which in most cases we are, because when we're attaching accessories we usually want them on top of the deck so that we can use them. So make sure you're working above the water line, and then at no point a fixture or fitting won't be subject to constant pressure from the water trying to get in. But like I said, when you're using sealant and you're working above the water line, you won't get any leaks as long as the fittings and fixtures are used correctly, as I'll show in this video. Okay, so the first fixture we're going to look at is a self-tapping screw. So this is a stainless steel self-tapping screw, 316 stainless. This won't rust in salt water, it's good for saltwater and freshwater use. But yet self-tapping screws, they can be used to attach a lot of accessories, but they're only really suitable for quite lightweight or light load accessories, so where there's not a lot of force exerted on the accessory. So fine for things like little eyelets, perhaps for attaching and clipping lightweight, leashing lightweight accessories too. You could use it to mount down perhaps a fish finder base, or a small camera mount, a low level camera mount on the front of your kayak. Lots of manufacturers actually use self-tapping screws to fit flush mount rod holders at factory, and as long as you've got at least 3 or 4 of these holding your rod holder in place, they are strong enough. But I've got a piece of plastic here. It's actually an offcut from a Hobie Adventure Island, one of the hatches they cut out to put into the hull. This is one of the offcuts, and it's made of high density polyethylene, really tough rigid plastic, but it's going to make quite a good example where I can I'll fit some small accessories to this to show you how you can use the fittings to fit little eyelets and other accessories. With self-tapping screws, all we need to do is, I'm going to use a small pad eye here as an example. It's got 2 holes, 2-hole fixing. What I would do is just drill 2 small pilot holes so that these have got something to dig straight into, and it makes them easy to screw into the plastic. But all you should simply have to do is place your fixture on your kayak. You know, this might be a pad eye for attaching a small leash to, or whatever it may be. Take a marker pen and mark the centre holes of where you want to fit your fixture, your accessory. So I've just marked a couple of holes there, and with a 2mm drill bit, just a small drill bit, I can just drill a couple of holes. Couple of pilot holes, and then with a screwdriver, a hand screwdriver, I wouldn't use an electric powered drill for this, a screwdriver. You can simply just screw these down into the plastic. You should be able to see it coming through there, through to the other side. And these self-tappers have quite a thick, deep thread on them. They do grip the plastic pretty well, but the plastic's only, let's say, 5mm thick. Most kayaks are around 4 to 5mm. Some are a little thinner in some areas, particularly flat areas of the hull. They can sometimes be down to 3mm thick, and in some areas up to 8mm thick or more on curved areas where the plastic pools in the mould. But in general, they're about 4 to 5mm thick, such as this bit of plastic here. Now, as you tighten down a self-tapping screw, you don't want to over tighten these. If you over tighten the screw, you run the risk of stripping the plastic, the threads through the plastic, and then you'll be left with a hole that's no good. But if you just get them to just tight, just nip them up just enough, and that will hold well there. So that's one through there. You can see quite a lot of thread and screw protruding from the other side. That's because the plastic's only 5mm, and the screw's obviously a bit longer. I think these are 20mm self-tapping stainless screws. Again with this one, and just screw this one down. Just nip it up, and that's a pad eye fixed there using stainless self-tappers. As I mentioned before, use a drop of sealant just before you pop the screws in each hole, and that will ensure they're fully waterproof. I mean, the threads are obviously gripping that plastic really well, so the chance of water getting through there anyway is very slim, but good practice, always use a drop of sealant. It's not going to do any harm. So that's how we'd use self-tappers to attach a small accessory, a lightweight accessory, a low bearing accessory to a kayak. By far the best option for fitting any accessory would be to use a bolt with a nut and a washer. This is by far the strongest. There's no way of pulling bolts with a backing washer through plastic. They're really strong, and would be the preferred fitting for any accessory, but only good if you can access the back of the area to where you want to fix your accessory, because you're going to need to do that nut up on the bolt. If you can't reach the back of the area, it's no good. You can't use bolts. You'll have to use a blind fixing, and I'll run through a couple of those in a minute, the Trifold Rivet and the rubber well nut. But if you can access the back of the area, if you can reach in through a hatch to get to where you can do up the nut, then use bolts. Here's an example here. It's a 316 stainless bolt. This is an M5. Brilliant. They can be used for just about any accessory. You can perhaps use slightly thicker bolts, an M6 with some accessories, but M5s are fine for just about everything. So yeah, these would be the preferred choice, and they're great for high load accessories, so stuff that takes a lot of strain on the kayak, anchoring systems, cleats for anchors, long camera poles where there's the weight of the camera on the end of a long pole. It's putting a lot of strain on the base, trolling rod holders, etc. If you can fit those using these, you're onto a win, 'cause these are the strongest fixing. But I'll just run through how I would fix this to the plastic. Again, I'll use this little pad eye, this little eyelet, as an example. This could be, again, a pad eye on an anchor trolley, and on my own kayaks, on my anchor trolleys, I use the nuts and bolts to fix them, because it's a high load accessory, and they're not going to fail. So with these, again, take your eyelet, take your accessory, mark up the holes which you will be needing to drill. Okay, so marked a couple of holes there. These are M5 bolts. M5 meaning it will be a 5mm hole required. If it was M6, it would be a 6mm, M4 a 4mm. But these are M5, so I've got a 5mm drill bit here in the drill. Let's just put a couple of holes through there. Okay, and again, before I fix anything, use a drop of sealant. I won't pop it on here because it'll just make a mess, but a couple of drops of sealant on each hole. Then what we can do is pop the accessory over the hole. Take your bolt. Pop those through the accessory, through the plastic. Like so. So they're through now. Then it's not going to be as easy as it is here in this example, but you've probably got to reach inside a hatch somewhere and pop on the washer and the nut. There'll probably be sealant everywhere when you're doing it, so you'll get mucky hands. So you'll have some cloth to hand to wipe your hands on. Then you'll need to reach inside the kayak with a spanner, get it over the bolt, and do these up. So I'm doing it with a hand screwdriver here, but you could use an electric screwdriver for this to set the torque quite low on it, so you're not going to go ripping through anything. But they can be done up pretty tight. You can nip those up nice and tight. Okay, that's rock solid. So there we go, that's the pad eye fitting there with the bolt, the stainless bolt, the washer and the nut. That's not going to pull through that plastic, that will be super strong. And like I say, if you can fit your accessory using the bolts and the nuts and the washers, then do so, because they won't fail and they'll be reliable and last and be able to take high loads. But as I said, you can only really use these if you can get to the back of the area where you need to fix the accessory, so you can do up these nuts. If you can't, you're going to have to use a blind fixing. And the next best option would be a trifold rivet. So we'll have a look at those next. Okay, the next fitting we're going to look at is a trifold rivet. Now these are a style of pop rivet, however, unlike a standard pop rivet, which would, when compressed, sort of expand into like a mushroom shape behind the thing you're fixing your accessory to, a trifold rivet has its shaft split in three. If I rotate that there, you can see the metal shaft through the center coming through. But what happens here is, as it compresses, the shaft splits in three directions, and what this does is it grips behind plastic really well. It won't pull through, or it would take a lot of force to pull through. So these trifold rivets, fantastic for when you can't get to the back of the area where you need to fix your accessory to do up a nut and bolt, but you still need a really strong fixing. So trifold rivets, I use them for all sorts. Great for even anchoring systems, for attaching anchor cleats, the pad eyes for an anchor trolley. You can use it for all sorts like that, fitting your fish finder to your kayak, camera mounts, etc. They're really strong, particularly if you're using a mount where you're using at least 3 or 4 of these. But what I'll do is I'll show you how I would attach these to the plastic, and all you need to use a trifold pop rivet is a handheld rivet tool, or sometimes called a rivet gun. Might look like a fancy complex bit of tool, but they're very cheap to buy. You can get them from practically every hardware store, and they're inexpensive. But yeah, this is what you'll need to attach your trifold pop rivet. Well worth investing in, because you can use rivets for fixing all sorts to kayaks. So with these, again, these rivets, they take a 5mm drill bit to they're basically a 5mm shaft, 5mm drill bit. Again, I'll use the holes I used last time, these 5mm holes here. Rivets will poke through them, no problem. So drilled a couple of holes. Again, good drop of sealant on each hole before fixing anything down. And then pop your accessory over the holes, pop the rivets through, like so. Now, see plenty of rivet below the fixing there. As you see, you just see the shafts where they're split there that are going to separate as I compress them with this rivet tool. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I'll try and do it on the video so you can see it happening. So yeah, the shaft of the rivet sort of goes into the rivet gun, pushes in. So I'm going to grab this correctly. And you start squeezing rivet. See that? There we go. It's just started splitting in 3 ways. You can see it's already gripping behind that plastic. And you basically got to keep working it, and it'll keep squeezing up onto the plastic and splitting. It takes a few seconds to do. As you see, it's getting quite compressed now against the plastic. See how it's split there 3 ways, grips the plastic really well. It's not going to pull through. Just gets to a point where it gets really solid, and what happens is the aluminium shaft of this rivet will snap, leaving just a rivet in place. There we go, hear that snap? I can pull that away. The shaft's gone from the rivet, and that's split 3 ways beneath there. You can see that there. So that's going to grip that plastic really well. Again, I'll go ahead and fit this second one now. Pull the old rivet shaft out. Pop this one in. And there we go. It starts to compress. It's just snapped and popped off there. So that's the pad eye there, or the accessory you'll be using, fitted with the trifold rivet. You can see it split 3 ways there, 2 of them behind the plastic. That's not going to pull through. That's absolutely rock solid. One of my favourite fixtures for fitting stuff to kayaks, particularly where you can't get to the back, where you can't use nuts and bolts and washers. So a fantastic accessory, can be used for all sorts on plastic and composite holes. But they're trifold rivets. Now, only downside with trifold rivets is the shaft length on them is often not long enough to go through some thick accessories. Now here I've got a Scotty deck mount. It's just fitted to a bit of plastic. I've used here M6 bolts with washers and nuts, similar to what I explained last time. Now with a rivet, often the shaft is not long enough to go through the accessory, down through the accessory, through the plastic of the kayak, and then protrude enough to have enough poking out to then split 3 ways. So for these types of mounts, trifold rivets are no good. You've either got to resort to really long self-tapping screws, but then again, if it's a high load accessory, then it might not be the best option. So the next option would be to have a look at using rubber well nuts, and we're going to have a look at those next. Okay, the final fixture we're going to look at is called a well nut, or a rubber expansion nut, sometimes called a rule plug. There's various names for it. That is an example there. So this is a long rubber nut. It's got a brass threaded insert in the base of it, rubber shaft, and then a rubber flange at the top, slightly wider flange at the top. And these are used in conjunction with a bolt. This is a M5 stainless bolt, and basically it screws down, and as you tighten down to the accessory down to the kayak, this rubber section will shorten, expand behind the plastic, and fix the accessory down to the kayak, and prevent it pulling back through. So these can be used for all sorts of accessories, such as fish finder mounts. Can use them for rod holder bases. You can use them for anchor trolley pad eyes and cleats as well. They're a pretty strong fixing, not quite as strong as the rivets and not as strong as the nuts and bolts, but in some cases when you can't use those fixings, and rubber walnuts are a great alternative. These would be known as a long rubber walnut. This is about 25mm long. You can find short walnuts, and some people do sell walnuts, and they look similar to this, but they're like half the size, and they need to be this length because they need to get through the plastic and have enough through the plastic to then expand really well to grip the plastic well, so they won't pull back through. And shorter ones won't do that. They have a tendency to pull through without too much stress put on them. But get hold of a long rubber walnut, and they're a good fixing for the kayaks. Now this has a shaft, often on the specs of the walnuts they'll quote they're a 10mm diameter, and there are 10mm holes required to fit these. Through personal experience, I've used lots of these outfitting kayaks, various accessories. Don't use a 10mm drill bit, it's too big. The rubber walnut will spin and not grip the plastic correctly, and it's quite hard to tighten down. I always opt for drilling with an 8mm or an 8.5mm drill bit, and if you have to, just wiggle the drill bit a little bit to get it just enough so this will just push through with quite a tight fit into the plastic. It will grip the plastic well so that when you tighten it up it's not going to spin and not going to cause you any problems fitting. But I'm going to show you now how I would fit one. I've just got a D-ring accessory here, just as an example, but like I say, it can be used for all sorts of accessories, particularly good for rod holder bases like this where it's quite a deep accessory. These sit flush to the plastic, and then you can just use a long bolt to reach down through the accessory and down to the walnut. So they do have their place there. But for this example, I'll show you how to fit this D-ring. Again, we would just mark where we want the accessory on this piece of plastic. I'm just going to pop it here. Mark the hole. I've got, I believe, an 8.5mm drill bit in this drill. I'm just going to drill the hole down through the plastic. Like so. Now we'll probably find it's too small and won't quite fit through yet. And yeah, it's going to be a real tight push to get through. That's fine because we don't want to overdo it straight away. Rather drill a hole that's too small and then wiggle it so it's just going to fit, rather than the other way, drill a hole and then find it's too big. So I've just expanded that a little bit there with a drill. Let's see if it will go through now. And you can use the bolt. It's quite tight just to ease it through. There we go, that's just pushed through there. As you can see, the rubber flange sits on top of the plastic with the rest of the walnut on the inside of the kayak. This would be the inside of the kayak here. Again, you can use a drop of sealant before popping that in, and even when it's in there you can squirt some onto the inside where the threads will be, just to form a good seal. This is going to be rubber expanded behind the plastic, so it's going to form a good seal anyway. So the chance of water getting through is slim, but again, good practice, just use a drop of sealant and you won't get any problems. So then it's just a case of popping the accessory over the top of the walnut, popping your bolt through and then screwing it tight. Again, use a hand screwdriver for this, don't go using a electric one, just don't want to overdo it, and I'll show you that as we tighten this up. So as I tighten it up, keep an eye on the rubber. Start to see it expanding like it's doing there, starting to bulge, and you just keep tightening that up to a point where it gets quite tight. You don't want to overdo it because you can end up ripping the brass insert that's in the base of the walnut through the rubber, and then you'll have to do it again with another walnut. But we can just tighten up. Still going there, you can see it's expanded quite a bit there now. And that's just getting tighter now. I don't want to overdo it, just nipped up there now. You can see that's bulged and gone quite a bit bigger than the original hole, so that now won't pull back through, and that's fitting on there pretty well. Pretty strong now because it's rubber nut. It will have a little bit of play in it, so you might be able to see that accessory there. It just wiggles a little bit. Like I say, these aren't as strong as trifold rivets and not as strong as nuts and bolts, but in some circumstances you can't use those fittings, and a rubber well nut offers a great alternative. So that there is a rubber well nut used to fix this accessory. Okay guys, so there we go. That covers all the different fixtures and fittings we can use for attaching accessories to our kayaks. So we had the strongest option being the bolts with the nut and washer combination. Really strong, great for high load fixing accessories. If you can, use those, but in some cases you can't, because you have to get to the back of the area where you need to do the nut up. If you can't get to the back of the area, then try and use Trifold pop rivets. So that's used to fix that one there, and behind the plastic they expand like so, and they're really strong fitting if you can't get to the back of the area to do a nut up for a bolt. In some cases you might not be able to use these, you might have to use a rubber well nut. Again, another good alternative to use, reasonably strong, good for just about every accessory as well. That's a rubber expanding nut there. And we also had the stainless self-tapping screws, great for lightweight accessories, and nice, quick and easy to fit. So that covers four fixtures and fittings there that you can use to attach accessories to your kayak. As I said, with each one, use a drop of sealant and make sure you're working above the waterline on the kayak, on the deck side, and you won't have any problem. These will be good, strong for attaching your accessories to your kayaks. Okay, as always, there's plenty more information on all this on my website, www.kayakfishing.blog, and for plenty more videos, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.